Welcome to another VeVe Digital Collectibles video. I'm Corey and I'm very excited to have with me today Eisner Award Winning Korean-American comic book artist, Jae Lee. Jae, thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with us today about your upcoming one-of-one artist proof on VeVe.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And for those of you who collect on VeVe, those of you who love Jae already know his body of work, but a lot of our collectors on VeVe kind of got into the collecting space and loving art and comics and all of that through digital collecting. And so you'll recognize some of his works, or at least things that his name are attached to, with Batman Black and White number 57 from Marvel. You'll see Sentry and Inhumans. From Dynamite, you're going to see Thundercats, amongst others, 24/7, Zero Ghost. And now, Jae, you're touching one-of-one artist proof, which is our most prestigious product category that we have on VeVe. So on screen right now, you're going to be seeing Vampirella Helliday Special number 1. Jae, talk to us a little bit about this piece. What does it sort of reflect about your artistic evolution?
Well, I'm really on a nostalgia kick these days. I've been looking at the classic illustrators of the past, like Norman Rockwell, Frank Frazetta, Alex Raymond. So I wanted to capture that nostalgic, timeless feel that those artists have. That's what I'm leaning more towards. You know, early on in my career, I was all about try to be as dark and angry as I could be through my art. But now that I'm older, I think I'm just looking back at the past, and I want to recapture some of the magic that was around back then.
I mean, that's very early 90s, which is whenever you got your start. There was a lot of really dark things in terms of artistic expression, especially in the comic book space. Now, can you talk to me just a little bit about, do you remember whenever this work sort of slid across your desk and you saw it? Like, where were you? What was going on in your life whenever this was, you know, assigned to you to work on?
Oh, I don't remember what was going on in my life. Usually just catching up on deadlines. So I was probably in a very frantic state. And if I remember, this was, like most projects, you're kind of thrown into the deadline nightmare-scape, and you have to claw your way out of it. But it's a good thing, because as an artist with OCD and self-diagnosed ADHD, according to all the stuff I've seen online, which explains my deadline problems. At least that's what I tell my editors. But the more time I have with something, the harder the piece becomes. So sometimes it's best to just not overthink it and let my instincts take over and just draw from the heart and not from my mind, because that's where things get all mixed up.
Really, really interesting. And a unique thing about one-of-one digital art on VeVe, especially for those of you who are watching for the very first time, we release comics and collectibles and all kinds of different things, but for the most part, there's a finite named amount of editions. So maybe for a comic, there's 5,000 editions spread across 5 different cover variants. But for a one-of-one, there is only one. And the way silent auctions work on VeVe is there'll be a minimum bid, and you won't know what other people are bidding. And so it becomes a chase by some of our more, prestigious collectors, the people that have the money to spend those larger amounts. So a thing that they really like to know is whenever we have what we call a phygital, where you'll receive the digital, but whoever gets that digital also receives the physical, is what was it actually done on? Was it done on, Bristol board? What were the dimensions? Was it charcoal? Was it all done digitally? How it was actually created is always a really interesting thing for our collectors to know.
Well, I do everything traditionally. I do everything by hand, pen and ink on Bristol board. The Bristol board is oversized 11 by 17, and it's shrunk down when it's printed in comics format. And the colors are done by June Chung, and she works digitally in Photoshop. For me, it's everything is done by hand. I like the tactile feel of pencil on paper.
That's really, really interesting, Jae. Thanks for sharing that. Now, this entry of this one-of-one artist proof sort of marks another entry for you in digital. Like we mentioned in the intro, you've released a lot of things digitally, but I think a lot of those things were released via a licensor. So you had worked on it at some point, that licensor owned it. This is really kind of your debut thing that your name is totally attached to. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you feel about the digital space, about the ability for your art to reach, a global audience?
I think when it comes to art, anything that'll get it in front of people's eyes is a good thing. We're not doing this in the secrecy of our basement. I want as many people as possible to see it. So whatever the newest technology is, whatever the newest avenue of getting this out there for people to see and enjoy, I'm all for it.
Fantastic. And the really interesting thing about VeVe now is part of our normal experience is that you can place things. I don't know if you knew this, Jae. So I'm kind of talking to the audience. I'll talk to you, but on VeVe, everything is compatible in augmented reality. So you can place it in AR in the real world and take pictures of it and with it. But now we also have a metaverse experience where you can invite other people into your VeVeverse space. And so like the really interesting thing about a one-of-one artwork is only one person in the world will be able to have that in their VeVeverse space. And there's certain collectors who own quite a few one-of-ones who will build and are building sort of museums and art galleries displaying their one-of-ones. And really the only way to see it would be in that VR environment. So it's kind of cool, because I came from a physical collecting background, collecting stamps and coins with my dad whenever I was a little kid. So it's neat to work here and kind of see how, collecting has been evolving. Now, with all that said, let's jump down memory lane. We've kind of talked about what's releasing. We've talked a little bit about your bylines, but let's talk a little bit about the history for those who may not be super familiar with your work. You've talked about in some articles that I read previously that Secret Wars #2, that was a really important comic to you. And it sort of sparked an interest for you in comics. Can you share a little bit about that comic and how it did influence you?
Well, when I was, God, I think I was like 10, 11, 12, I can't remember. My mom used to take me to the laundromat. And while she was doing the laundry, my brother and I would hang out at 7-Eleven next door and just go through the spinner rack and read all the comics, or as much as we could within the hour or two that we had. The one thing about Secret Wars that made me pull the trigger and buy my first comic was it had all the characters of the Marvel Universe. So I couldn't possibly buy all the different titles, but I could buy this one issue that had all the characters in there. And so it was a perfect entryway into the Marvel Universe. And the reason why I say Secret Wars issue #2 is because issue #1 was so hot, it immediately sold out. So I don't think it even hit the newsstands, right? I mean, collectors were just snatching it up. And that was actually the first back issue that I bought. I had called up, I was buying all the different Secret Wars issues, and around issue number 10 or so, I said, it's killing me that I don't have issue 1. So I opened up the phone book and I called up the different comic book stores, and I didn't even know they had such things as comic book stores. And this one store had a copy, and I think it was like $5, which was huge, because it's like 7 times more than I would have paid for a single issue. But I had my mom drive me out there, and I bought it, and that was my first back issue purchase.
That's so cool. For me, Secret Wars is like an interesting study in collecting, because obviously we're a collectible company, and I'm all about collecting and understanding why people collect. And one of the interesting histories about Secret Wars is that it was largely influenced by the sale of physical toys. And so it was one of those big collaborations in there. If you all, have the time, just do a YouTube search for like commercials, Secret War toys, and you'll see just like the best era coming to you soon, Secret Wars, and like pans and zooms of all the little articulated action figures. But it was a cross collaboration to sell toys and to sell comics. which again, it's interesting to see because you see that same flavor in collecting today. So I love Secret Wars because I love that like nerdy history. What is it? Secret Wars #8, I think is the one because of Black Suit Spider-Man. So the value of
Yeah.
that one is,
Yeah.
astronomical. So that was sort of what sparked your interest in comics. As you got into, like you said, right out of high school, you pretty much you went to work, and your work initially, it really used negative space, lights and darks. What drew you to that? Like why did you lean into that? Is it just you saw something that influenced that, or that just artistically worked for you?
My biggest influences back then were Simon Bisley and Bill Sienkiewicz, and those guys are true masters. So I was, basically just stealing from their expertise. And in fact, every time I see Simon Bisley or Bill Sienkiewicz, I profusely apologize for swiping them. I once showed Simon Bisley a picture of Chapel I did for Youngblood Strike File. And I said, "Does this look familiar?" And he goes, "Yeah, I think I saw that ad when it came out." I said, "No, it's because I directly traced your drawing of Lobo."
Oh man, Bill has a beautiful Return of the Jedi #1 exclusive cover. We released Return of the Jedi #1, and 4 of the variant covers were exclusive to VeVe variants, and he did one of them, and it is just the most. You should check that out.
Oh,
If
wow.
you haven't looked at VeVe at all, like we have so many VeVe exclusive variant covers for even like Silver Age comics, but his for Return of the Jedi #1 is just chef's kiss. So let's talk about the evolution. So what was like the first things you were working on?
Oh, the first thing was back in 1990 on Marvel Comics Presents.
Presents.
Yeah.
Namor?
And then I did Namor after that.
Okay. How
The
much?
Sentry and
Go ahead.
Inhumans came much later.
Okay. For the evolution, so kind of going from now, like this, the Vampirella Helliday Special 2024, and you're working in, the early 90s. How much has your art changed in that time? Like in terms of the way you approach a cover, and sort of
Oh,
execute that art?
when I first started, I thought I knew everything, but I didn't know anything. I was just all bravado and youthful energy and 90s angst that I just threw on the page. I used a lot of ink and razor blades and just cut into it. And it was a very physical way to draw. I was so young and full of energy. But now that I'm older, when I'm drawing, I'm more precise and my line is much more cautious and careful. I think it's more refined. I know a lot more than I did back then, but I do feel like I've lost that energy that I had back then.
I think it's just the experience that comes with age. You do something long enough, you kind of want to conserve that creative energy. Yeah, I think for a lot of creatives, ebbs and flows, right? Like you have those peaks and those huge valleys where in those valleys, you're just struggling to get the thing out. And the peaks, you're like, I could just do this all day. But sort of, let's sort of reflect on your career, which is kind of what you're doing. As you look back, was there a certain project or piece that you can remember that was like especially difficult or challenging?
Um, I'd say my creator-owned work, Hellshock, that was the most challenging thing because I wrote it and I drew it. But because I wrote it, I realized, wow, I suck at storytelling. I am physically incapable of drawing the kind of story I wanted to tell. And so when I did volume 1 of Hellshock, I was still very young, 22, maybe 23, I can't remember. And I was so unhappy with the art. I took 2 years off just to learn how to draw. So I came back with Hellshock Volume 2, and I feel like I became a much better artist, a much more um, thoughtful artist, focusing more on storytelling than on big splash pages. And so that's why it was the most challenging and yet the most rewarding project. It was because it marked my growth and evolution as an artist.
So you're kind of talking a lot about the evolution because, that's the direction we're going. I'm curious if you have any advice. If someone was getting into the comic industry, maybe they were thinking about, throwing their hat in the ring. What advice would you give to a new creative coming into the space in this current day and age?
Be good. I think self-analysis and knowing what you're capable of is very important. You don't want to be delusional to the point where you think, oh, this is better than a lot of the art out there. But at the same time, people these days, they have so many ways of breaking in that simply weren't around back then. When I broke in, the only way you could break in was nail something into Marvel or DC, or corner a editor at a convention and force them to look at your work on the spot. But these days with Instagram and social media, if you're good, you'll get noticed. So the most important thing is be good and someone's going to notice.
Very nice. I've heard that advice. I think I was talking to Addy Granoff at an interview that we have on the channel for one of one artist proofs, and his was very similar. It was be undeniable. Like if you can truly believe that your art's undeniable, then you're in a place where you can actually get it submitted. It's become a mantra of mine. Whatever we're working on different projects, I'm like, is it undeniable? Like, is it that good? As we slide towards the outro of our video, is there any special words you'd like to share, Jae, with anyone that's looking at that auction whenever it pops up for the beautiful Vampirella Helliday Special?
Just know that in this world of AI created art, this kind of art is just drawn traditionally. It comes from the heart. It's the purest manifestation of what I can do, put down on paper for you to enjoy.
I wish I could afford to go for it myself, Jae. For all of you watching, be sure to download the mobile app available on both Android and Apple. You can go to VeVe.me. And again, it'll be a silent auction. So whenever it goes up, there'll be basically a time period in which everyone can bid, and whoever wins will have that delivered straight to their vaults. Thank you again, Jae, for taking the time to come and talk with us. And for all of you watching at home, happy collecting. We've got Batman Black and White, number 52. Dang it, 57.
Wait, this is where the editing comes in.
Yeah, of course.
To read something,
No,
right?
you're absolutely. No. You don't have anything. You don't have anything to read at all. I was gonna be really hammy and talk about our dogs, but I'm just gonna skip that for to be a little more concise. It's just that easy. Now we're done.
Oh.
I saved you the trouble of having to go to camera there.
Well, thank you so much, Corey. I appreciate it.